how difficult it is to secure client side anything. And here we have now that we have the Claude Code source code, we see how many things they were trying to look at from as a client side component. And I feel like, of course, it makes sense from a performance angle. Of course, it makes sense that we don't want to deal with the latency of sending something all the way upstream and costs and whatnot. This is the consequence, right? How do you balance what goes client side, what goes server side? Not to mention the fact that we're all, some of the commentary I saw, people were, they were more excited about what does the development version of Claude Code tells us about the near future, right? So people had code names for new versions, for new models. I think that there were versions for Opus and Sonnet and a bunch of other things built in there, new features. That so there's the oh my goodness, what's going to be new in Claude Code itself, and the oh my God, what can we as security focused professionals take from this?
I think that's a good point, Fernando, because there is quite literally a cottage industry in the client device market around Apple and the beta test versions of iOS and macOS that they release that have references to MacBooks that haven't been released yet. And if you've ever looked at a MacBook release, they're all pretty generic and boring, right? It's like MacBook 14, 2, but it can betray, like if you have a 14, 1, 2, and 3, you know, there are going to be 3 different versions of that MacBook that have all these different things. And it's gotten to the point where Apple has basically gone on the offensive where they're like, I'm going to load in like 100 of these. And more than half of them are fake. So you don't actually know which ones are going to be release versions. And that's not something that a company has ever had to deal with before in this space because, well, you know, the code's never leaked. And nothing's ever leaked until the first time it happens. And so are we going to start seeing them kind of going on the offensive to start hiding some of the stuff? Because downloading patch notes and pulling them apart to find what new releases look like is nothing new. It's been done in the operating system game, in the video game space, in all kinds of client architectures for years. But
Sure.
you have to have that balance, right? Of do I run this as an app, like a full app on somebody's machine and do all the things that I want with it? Or do I run it like an Electron app where it's basically a web browser? And there's pros and cons to both. I tend to fall on the side of the app because it's better performance and it's a more complete solution that doesn't involve me, you know, having to worry about, is this the 14th time that Slack has had to reload today because of a helper problem? But I don't think that the companies are ready to expose that. And how many times have we said on this podcast and in many other things that we've done, you always have to assume that you're being breached. You always have to assume that people are pulling your code apart and analyzing it. Because if you don't, you are going to have a process that would allow something like this to be left in there. Is this, so I have to ask the question now, getting on maybe more to the security control side of things, was this a failure of Anthropic's build process to catch this before it got pushed to live? Or was this the failure of people on the inside who thought, oh, we don't need to put that control in there because we're not dumb enough to ever make that happen?
Oh, that's probably, at least right now, tough to know whether it was a decision error. But it certainly was a process error, right? How did this happen that this gets externally both distributed through NPM, but also to the Cloudflare bucket that had this source code? That's the ultimate big oops, right? Not just that it was, I had this map file inside of it. I think to me that the biggest gap here is, you know, we're trying to build trust in AI and we're trying to build trust in the code that AI generates.